Well, meanwhile, the Australian embassy in Ukraine was evacuated this morning as intelligence reports suggest that Russia is getting closer to invading the country. With that and the rest of the day's big federal political news, I'm joined now by senior political reporter Jonathan Lee in Canberra. Jonathan, the federal government has come under criticism from China. We'll get to the Ukraine shortly. Why is that?
Good evening to you, Chris. China remains frustrated that we had a meeting at the Quad here on Friday. We're talking the United States, Japan, India, Australia. It was all of the foreign ministers meeting, obviously to discuss China's Belt and Road policy and draw a line in the sand and begin that pushback. While we might continue to talk about other humanitarian means, there's a very clear reason why four leading democracies have come together to draw this line in the sand. So China has hit out at that, described it as being provocative. They're upset. They're also upset about a story which leaked into the papers on Friday, talking about a so-called puppeteer, a businessman trying to put candidates into the upcoming federal election, which would in effect usurp democracy here and have a bent towards China. So they say they've never tried to meddle in our internal politics. Obviously, that's something which our government would dispute in a number of areas. So that has caused frustration as well.
Are we expecting anything at all in the coming week on this religious discrimination bill, or is it shelved for the rest of this parliament?
It's a very good question. It's firmly shelved as far as the Prime Minister thinks at the moment. He spoke this morning in South Australia. He made it very clear when he spoke to the Maronite community that it was his wish to pass this legislation, but he now won't see this legislation turn into something that it's not. He's frustrated that 5 Liberal MPs crossed the floor. It could have been 6 that they crossed the floor to vote with the amendments that the Labor Party chose. What those amendments would have meant would have been greater protection for gay students and transgender students to prevent them being potentially expelled from their schools. The Prime Minister has now sought to shelve his legislation there. We won't see it reintroduced into Parliament at this stage, which would mean that at this stage we don't have the religious discrimination legislation that he promised, and we also don't have a federal ICAC, which he also promised. I'm not sure if we got the grab. I'm going to try and throw to it. This was a little of what he had to say to the church this morning.
I would rather lay down our attempt to secure those additional protections than see them compromised or undermined. We will see where this goes in the future. There will be those who will say if I have been humiliated and all of those things, but happy to suffer those sins.
Chris, just finally, I want to draw on some comments the Prime Minister made in regards to Ukraine today also. He was asked specifically, following Joe Biden's comments, whether there could be a transnational response, an international response to Russia invading Ukraine's sovereign territory. He made it very clear that Australia hadn't been asked at this stage. He certainly called out Russia's provocation and the 100,000 troops which amassed on the border. Have a listen.
And I want to send a very clear message on behalf of Australia, a liberal democracy who believes in freedom and the sovereignty of states, not just in Europe, but in our own region as well, that the autocratic, unilateral actions of Russia to be threatening and bullying Ukraine is something that is completely and utterly unacceptable.
He's juggling some balls at the moment. Jonathan Lee, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.